White ibis. Nah. Downy. Softly white. Nah. Choice cream. Morning glory. White ice. Mystic sea breeze. Snow-covered mountaintop. Snow-covered valley. Snow-covered snowman. Tiki white. Birch white. Frosty white. Ah.
Welcome to Starbucks. What can I get started for you today?
Yeah, I need a venti, half whole milk, 1/4 1%, 1/4 non-fat, extra hot, 4 shots, no foam latte with whip, 2 packets of Splenda, 1 sugar in the raw, a touch of vanilla syrup, and 3 short sprinkles of cinnamon. And actually, can you make that with 2 shots of decaf? My doctor says I'm hypertensive.
Oh, hey, babe. I see you chose white.
It's clamshell.
Simple living is our theme for the rest of this month, and this helps illustrate the need for simplifying things. It's a complicated world we live in with lots of choices and lots of avenues that we can go down. And actually, things happened this week that were unexpected for all of us and lead us into, I feel, a responsibility to speak to some of the challenges that we face in our country and affects us here in our community and affects us as individuals, how to process the tragedies that have befallen us in our world and in our country this week. So with this theme, simple living, and the complications that arose, it seems even appropriate that this is our theme. How do we simplify the way we live in the middle of a complex world? The way we relate to each other is a great challenge as we have different opinions and different observations from the things that happen. With the officer involved killing of Philando Castile in Minnesota, Alton Sterling in Louisiana, I found my heart burdened for my African American brothers and sisters who identified with what appeared in videos that were put online and went viral, what appeared to be mistreatment. One of our challenges is we see only what we're presented. We didn't used to have these challenges because we didn't have the technology that now we all carry. Having a cell phone and being able to capture these things, we would have never had those moments to see things. We would only hear about them after the fact and after things have all been pretty much sorted out. Now we're trying to sort them out from our own observations. And that's a great challenge. And when we see these things, we draw conclusions, some of which may be accurate, some of which may not be, but they're real to us in the moment that we're walking it out. Then the murder of 5 police officers in Dallas added more sorrow to the conversation and anger. I found my heart burdened for the law enforcement community, knowing the pressure that puts so many of them under, where they go to do their job, to protect, to serve. Their families are concerned about their loved ones that are out on the street in moments like these. Just for wearing the uniform, 5 men were shot and murdered by a person who did a despicable act, evil that had entered into his heart. And then we see that right on the heels of the angst we already have of a different kind. Complex and complicated. I'd had people on Thursday asking if I would say anything about these events and just from a leadership or spiritual point of view, try to give some guidance. Late in the day, Thursday, I determined to make a brief statement on our Facebook page that some could access and maybe share. And after doing that, it was only a short time that we then learned of the tragedy that happened in Dallas, and went back to the Facebook page to add a statement because now there was a pressure of a different kind. And I found one of the challenges, even for myself, is to weigh in on trying to identify with the pain of one group of people can seem to another perspective like we're taking sides, and that's not the goal. We need to find a way to build bridges and to come together, to find a way to have conversations that make us better and that cause us to appreciate each other's journey all the more. Very challenging. How can we simplify in the midst of this complex moment in which we live? The place where we turn really is the Bible and asking God for help. How can we sort these things out when we're seeing just dimly the things that are happening? We don't have full understanding. How can we gain some insight and wisdom? Here's a couple of scriptures that I think help us today. Isaiah chapter 33 and verse 15 from the Message translation puts it into language that we can grasp. And it begins with the word simple. The answer is simple. It seems like it's not, but in the middle of all the trials we have, God said, I want to help simplify this for you. Here's the answer. Live right, speak the truth, despise exploitation. That speaks to me because there are many who feel exploited in the times in which we live. Refuse bribes, reject violence. Another very appropriate instruction where violence erupts in the midst of what was meant to be peaceful marches and peaceful demonstrations. Avoid evil amusements. This is how you raise your standard of living. A safe and stable way to live, a nourishing, satisfying way to live. And then I'd like to focus our attention on one verse in Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. This verse, I feel, keeps coming back as a standard to base life upon for many reasons. And today it speaks to me very specifically. God has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? That's a statement that gets my attention. What does the Lord require of me? He answers it for us. To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Act justly. We're told by God to act in a fair way toward others, to treat them the way you would want to be treated. That very thing is said in other parts of Scripture. The golden rule is in the New Testament, do to others what you would want them to do to you. That golden rule is embraced by people across all the spectrum of society, without religious persuasion even, without religious biases. It's very simple humanity that we should consider treating other people the way we would want them to treat us. It's a hard standard to live by, and it's broken and violated many, many times over. But it should be a goal we would strive for. To act justly is to seek to treat people the way we would want to be treated. There are two sides to justice. One is obvious. When we talk about we want justice in the situation, it's usually when someone has done something wrong, they've violated a law, they've done something evil. The cry is for justice. We want justice for that harm done. And that is an appropriate application of acting justly. That's why we have laws. That's why we have law enforcement. That's why we have courts. That's why we make these judgments, because acting justly at times is rightly given out because the need of someone who's done wrong. But there's another side to justice that sometimes is overlooked. To act justly is not just about executing a judgment over someone who has failed. It's also about acting justly to people that are oppressed, to people that are caught in a system that has a cycle built into it that they don't know how to escape from. There are groups of people that find themselves under oppression, and where we have the ability, we should seek to lift that oppression and that burden from people groups. That is also acting justly. It's saying, I see the dilemma, I see the plight that you're under, and it's not fair. It's not chosen. It is often visited upon groups that find themselves under a heavy weight of a system that is not helping to move them out from under it. So what can we do? It's one of the things I love about our church community is I feel like that is a part of our desires, part of our DNA, so to speak, as a group that come together. We try to act justly wherever we can. When we reach out, try to help the homeless has been a long-running part of what we do on a regular basis. We're saying we see people that are burdened. Instead of saying, man, they are responsible for their way, they got themselves in this problem, they need to get themselves out. We're saying these people are oppressed. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to get themselves out of this hole. Is it possible that we can act justly by reaching out to them and saying, I want to help lift the burden from you. I want to help show you the pathway to liberty. I want to help show you how to build a resume, how to get a job. I want to help put you in an apartment where you can have shelter over your head so that you can make good decisions because you're safe every night. I want to find a way to lift the oppression from you and not blame you for the hole that you find yourself in. That's acting justly, and I love that is a part of our hunger and our desire to help. We have engaged in assisting in the inner city of our community, in public schools and other places where we see injustice, we see a heavy weight upon groups of people. We see children that don't have enough food to eat when they go to school. They're on the free lunch program and don't have enough income to live above the poverty line, and they don't have the ability to have the support systems to get their work done in the school classroom. So we help tutor and mentor. We help build some bridges for families to find a way to come together. There are things we can do to lift the heavy weight of oppression, and that too is acting justly. When we have it in our ability to do, we see the need and we say, we're not going to let people drown in that place, not knowing how to get out from under it. We're going to come and we're going to provide assistance. We're going to lift that burden from them. Justice is most effective when it is administered with a spirit of compassion. It leads us to the need to practice empathy and compassion. Empathy, it's a simple word. It really means that we put ourselves in someone else's shoes and try to see the world through their eyes. We empathize. How do you empathize with someone when you really don't feel what they're feeling because you're not them? You haven't experienced what they've experienced, so it's really difficult to say, hey, I get it. But when we purpose to try, this is something we can learn to do. Empathy isn't just something that you either have or don't have. It can be a learned virtue. It can be a learned trait where we say, I want to empathize. I want to figure out how this affects you. I want to see what you're seeing. I want to sense it, what you're sensing. And I have to go there. I have to put myself there. I think back in my journey with my family, with my wife, to the early years of our marriage. We had 3 children rather soon after we were married. And when the third was born, the oldest was 3. They were 3, 15 months, and newborn. With that season of life, I have never been so happy that I had a job. And I could go to work. I could get up in the morning and I could leave that environment of mayhem. And I could go to an adult world and talk to adult people and stay till the end of the day. I never went home early if I could help it. Because I knew what I would face when I got there. And yet, one of the things I had to learn, and it was a learned trait, was I need to think about what my wife has been through all day long. She's not had any adult conversations She's had little children that are taking and taking and taking, and they're not giving back. It's very difficult. It's physically challenging, emotionally challenging. What an incredibly difficult task in that season of life. And I had to put myself in that frame of mind so that when I go home, I would engage and get on the floor with those kids and take some of the pressure off. One of her highlights was going to the grocery store by herself while I stayed home with those 3 little ones. That was like amazing. That was incredible, joyous moment for her. And I hate grocery stores, but she loved them without the children. Learning to empathize was important. If I wouldn't have, it could have added trial and pain to her life and to our relationship and friendship. I could help, or I could do harm by my ignorance. I could do harm by my lack of sensitivity, not thinking about what she's going through. And that need has changed into different ways throughout life. Our children grew, and today it's a much different understanding that is needed than in that day. But the need is still to adjust and to work at seeing the world through another person's eyes. The best place to start empathizing is in our own family, with our loved ones, with our children, our parents, to try to put ourselves into their shoes and think about what they're dealing with and what they're going through. It matters. And I can act justly. I can take some of the oppression off when I understand what is going on in their life. Years ago, something happened for me that I am grateful for I feel like it has helped me in my personal journey see the world better, different than I would have. When I was in the early years of my ministry life and career, we pastored a church in Omaha, Nebraska. During that time, there was a person attending our church. She was a professor at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. She lived in our community, attended our church, and she was very bright. She had a doctoral degree in sociology and anthropology, the study of man and the study of how societies work. And she took on kind of a mission of sorts to meet with me and help me understand how to see the world different. At the time, we were working on building bridges with churches in the African American community of Omaha. It was a very segregated city. There were areas of town that were predominantly black, churches that were predominantly black, and then the white side of town. It's pretty much the way it was in that time. Not a very integrated city. We started building relationships, and I had a friendship with an African American pastor that we bonded and just had a really good relationship. We started talking about how to share each other's churches in fellowship, and we'd bring our choir to their church, and their choir would come to our church, and we would exchange pulpits on occasion. It was a really wonderful experience and a growing opportunity for me to see the world differently. And then this professor teaching me how to see how African American persons experience life in America based upon the history of the way their ancestors were treated. We're talking about not very long ago. Fathers and mothers and grandfathers and grandmothers, and the kind of life that they had a journey in. It was enlightening to me. I'm grateful for that enlightenment, and it's something I still try to understand in a limited way that I can, but I work at it. I read. She gave me books to read that would help me understand these things. And so in our community here in Sacramento, that's something we continue to do, is to try to build bridges with the African American community. And we are a very diverse community. Ethnicities of all kinds within our church family, and certainly within the fabric of our city. And it matters that we understand each other and come together, and we act justly on each other's behalf. We try to lift oppression where it exists. It's God's will. It's His desire for us. So this week, when these events were unfolding, and horrific watching the things online, on television, and listening to the news stories and the conversations going on there gets to be such an angry exchange based on one person's opinion juxtaposed against another. How can we come together? How can we bridge that divide? The New York Times printed an article about these tragedies late in the week, and they had online responses to the article that went out. People can editorialize and respond online, and one of those online responses was picked up by the news services and then got spread across the news wires, which is where I picked it up. The person who wrote it identified themselves simply as a Midwest dermatologist in Maryland. They don't give their names to those kind of editorials, but some kind of title, and this was that person's title. This is what I read from this person's perspective. We were brought here in chains against our will, beaten, raped, abused, and then tortured if we fought back. We were lynched, terrorized in our own country, and denied the rights that we were entitled to in our own Constitution. We are targeted, harassed, falsely accused, and then told we bring this on ourselves because we do not act like the rest of society. But did any of the above happen to the rest of society? I'm tired of smoothing your ruffled feathers in my presence because of your fear, tired of being exceptional so that I can be treated like the rest of society. I'm tired of having to argue my humanity to you. But most of all, tired of looking into the faces of my little boys and feeling like I have to extinguish their joy, their exuberance, because you think black men are more dangerous than men of other races. My boys like Pokemon, probably like your boys. My boys play soccer, probably like your boys. My boys are bright and curious and gifted, probably like your boys. But my boys are profiled. Are yours? That perspective speaks to me. It's real. And if I care enough and don't react and try to respond in the way I see the world, and I try to understand the way this person sees the world, it's very helpful, it's very informative, and it's very accurate. That is what I learned from this professor of sociology at the University of Nebraska. That is what I've learned in my reading over the years, that there is a history that we don't feel if we haven't lived it. But for those who have lived it, those who have come from it, our society has grown and changed in many ways profitably, but in other ways not fully. And these challenges yet face many of our African American brothers and sisters in the world in which we live. I feel that burden. Likewise, I empathize and have compassion and feel moved to feel the burden of those in law enforcement. I have personal relationships with several members of our church who serve our community in that arena. The warden from San Quentin Prison lives in our community and has children that attend our school. He presides over a challenging segment of our society. I know prison guards who serve at Folsom Prison, Joe Eierman being one of them, who goes to work every day in difficult environments. I feel that burden. Bruce Colston, who just retired from the prison system at Mule Creek, where he served his career. Jay Barrett, a law enforcement officer. Jason Palmy, a sergeant in the SAC PD. Sergeant Palmy reached out to me a couple of years ago, simply wanting to have conversations about the burdens that he deals with going to work every day. He's in his 30th year of service in our community. It led to different coffee conversations, and 3 or 4 months ago, I went on a ride-along with him on his shift. I was impressed with his leadership, for he has other officers under his supervision, and his instruction to them on how to diffuse situations was impressive. His concern for the citizens in his area of patrol was awesome. And to experience it firsthand, I talked to Officer Palmy last night, to try to gain perspective on how he's feeling in the midst of the burden that our law enforcement community is under today. I feel that burden. And to feel that and to feel the burden of my African American brothers and sisters should not be something that's opposite. It should be something that we share together and build a bridge for, and we find a way to come together. For I know that the law enforcement community is filled with men and women who care, who do their job with great concern and great excellence. And when there are a few who may go offline and may have the wrong thing in their heart and may react wrongly in a situation, who may do harm, there are a few in any organization that have gone down the wrong path, and those few should not taint the whole. Yet that's often what happens when we see a few who have done something horrific. We then paint a broad brush that that's the way it is for all, and it's not the case. I know the feeling of churches and pastors who can go off the wrong path. One did here in our community just weeks ago in the reaction to the Orlando massacre, and said some horrific things that got broadcast across America right from our own community. I had an unusual meeting with that person this week. Very immovable, very stuck in wrong thinking. And my fear is that one person taints the whole. And that's not where I'm at. That's not where we all come from. But when one is in a bad place, we need to realize, be able to separate that as an incident, as an issue that needs to be dealt with justly as well, but not lump everybody into the same package. I know Marty Piccone, that's a sheriff's officer, been a part of our church for years. I see him often and have concern for how he deals with these matters going to work. For Jeremy Stewart, who's a highway patrol, he's been called into service in Oakland. He had to show up in riot gear for protests that were going on there just in the last 2 days. He's at one protest here in our community today in uniform, concerned about whether he'll be safe or not, his family worried about him. I feel that burden. It should not pit us against each other. It should cause us to come together and to put ourselves with empathy in the shoes of another and see the world through their lens and say, what can we do to bring a conversation into the way we live our life that empathizes and that's concerned for and that builds bridges with those that we care about and love and want to walk with in this world. The last thing we need is to love mercy. Love mercy. It's interesting how these two words are put together by God. Love mercy. Not just be merciful, but love it. I've learned to love mercy. I need it. I want mercy in my own life. When Jesus died on the cross for me, he didn't do it because I deserved it. I didn't deserve any mercy. I've done wrong. I've failed. I've sinned in my life. And yet Jesus said, I'm going to take care of that for you. I'm going to take the penalty you deserve on myself. I'm going to handle it. And then I'm just going to give you mercy in exchange for your mess. And I say today, how thankful I am for that. I love mercy, that he has forgiven me and given me a gift that I don't deserve. And Jesus said, blessed are the merciful, for they will obtain mercy. That makes sense to me. I want to be merciful because I want to receive mercy. I don't want to hold somebody else to account in a way that I don't want to be held to account. I want mercy, therefore I need to find the pathway to give it. Switch from being resentful to being grateful for the mercy that we've received and ask God to show us the way to give mercy out to others in this world. That's where we need to be. It's what we need to do. Much of a person's internal and external unrest stems from conflicts with others. We can get free of that conflict in our own soul and begin to give mercy in every place that we can. Don't just show it, but love it. Acting justly and loving mercy are necessary companions. When given from a humble heart It keeps us all moving in the right direction. So today, here's what's on my heart. It's difficult for me to know how you hear it and to know how you will receive it. But I'm compelled to share it. I feel this is what God is saying to me from the Bible and from what I sense in my relationship with Him. I have a heavy heart today for my African American brothers and sisters, for I have a sense of how the events that happened this week are seen and felt. And I want to put myself somehow, in some limited way, in your shoes to be able to understand the pain that these things cause, and not to resent you for the way you feel or to give you some answer that you shouldn't feel that way or to tell you I think something different. I just want to say I feel that pain. I'm sorry for what you feel. It burdens me. It causes me concern for you and for your heart and health. And I say to our law enforcement, I'm burdened today for you, for the pain that you feel, for the weight you bear, for the work you do, and the families that have concern whether you come home at the end of the day or not. Heavy, difficult. I want to try to understand that and not look at these two burdens as competing with one another, but actually burdens that we can embrace equally, burdens that can draw us together, that can give us the ability to have concern for one another and compassion for one another, that the acting justly in empathy will inform us of how we can appreciate the human struggle and we can find ways to lift the oppression, to let people breathe, and to say, let's walk this out together. I want to walk with you, not against you. I want to be for those that are hurting today, not against them. I believe that's God's heart. I believe that's what He does. I believe that's what we can do with His help. So God, we trust you today in our journey. We look for help and wisdom. In our limited condition, we know that you're complete. And we ask you to give us insights and understandings, revelations that will help us to care for one another well. Help us to lift burdens and not add burdens to those around us. Help us to bear one another's burdens, to lift the weight of oppression, to act justly, to do to others what we would like them to do for us. Give us that supernatural wisdom and ability. And we pray for healing in our land. Such a difficult time and so many different opinions. We pray you give us common ground and give us ability to heal, to come together for the good of all. And let your grace flood our hearts and our minds and our land. We ask for your help in these things in Jesus' name. Before we finish our prayer, it might be that you feel the need for mercy, that God's grace would come and lift the burden of your past from you. All we have to do is accept the gift of mercy. But we do have to ask for it. Just receive it by simple acknowledgement that He offers it. If you would like that today, would you mind just lifting your hand as a testimony? It says, I would like that mercy in my life. I'm ready to receive it. Thank you for that. Why don't we stand together? And with this song, it just helps us to focus our thoughts in on Jesus. After this song, I'm going to ask if you can wait for just like 5 more minutes. It's kind of a family talk. I need to tell you about some changes that are coming in what we do together, and it won't take me long to do, but so I invite you just to hold on after this song for just about 5 more minutes if you can. Well, let's worship together. If you would like someone to pray with, I invite our prayer partners to come again. If you raise your hand, it's like, I want to just pray that prayer with somebody else. We've got some friends here that would love to walk with you in agreement for God to touch your life. So feel free to come for that prayer. Our prayer partners would come too. Let's just give him praise with this song.